and in fact, when Donald Trump was president, they did have it so much better. Look, I brought this. This is $5,000 right here. This is 5 months. Donald J. Trump would like to give every single American this.
The rise in the price of gold tells you that there's real concern about the integrity of the dollar. The Fed is messing up again because it's looking at the wrong thing.
And the rise in interest rates. As the Fed lowers rates, the market says, we don't believe you. We think you're going to have to raise them. Those rates have been going up.
They have no faith and trust in the Fed.
You focused on this before. What about something really revolutionary? Essentially getting rid of the Federal Reserve Board, going back to a gold standard, turning the Federal Reserve into a kind of a currency exchange. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Thanks for being here. Steve, first of all, he may not do it. He may just live with Powell until 2026. But could President Trump fire him?
Wow. JD Vance, guys. Now, it was just days since President-elect Donald Trump won the 2024 presidential election, and it is very apparent to the American people. Look at the economy, look at inflation. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden has devastated our economy. And what we're seeing here is we're seeing JD Vance pull out $5,000. And a lot of people in this crowd in particular are feeling it. They're hurting. But one man from the crowd cries out to JD Vance and asks for $5,000, guys. And what JD Vance does next is just unbelievable. But I'm not surprised. But by the way, guys, if you haven't already, please take a second, hit the like button for the video. I totally appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for subscribing to the channel. We got a lot to talk about: economy, the stock market, Donald Trump, and what Trump's going to be doing next with the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell.
So much better, and in fact, when Donald Trump was president, they did have it so much better. Look, I brought this just to illustrate how much Kamala Harris's inflation has cost us. This is $5,000 right here. This is 5 months of Kamala Harris's inflation. Every North Carolina family is paying this in additional grocery prices, in additional rent prices, in additional housing prices. And ask yourselves, how much bigger is this stack going to be with 48 months of Kamala Harris's leadership?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. We have never, ever seen inflation at these levels, at least not in my lifetime. I mean, maybe back in the Great Depression, the 1930s, 1929. We've never seen, at least in the last 40 years-ish, 7, 8, 9% inflation. And it's affected our rent, our grocery prices, gas prices, the cost of housing. I mean, in all facets of our lives, asset appreciation, if you're not invested in the stock market, you've likely felt it even more so than the average everyday investor. What do you guys think? Hit me up in the comment section down below. Don't forget to hit the like button for the video. For more content, be sure to subscribe to the channel.
The answer is it's going to be way too high. Now, meanwhile, Donald J. Trump would like to give every single American this in the form of a tax cut. So you got to ask yourselves.
Let's do it. Send me some.
Ask yourselves, every 5 months, do you want Kamala Harris reaching in your wallet and taking this out? Or do you want a president of the United States who is going to give you more of your hard-earned money back and make it easier for you and your families to prosper? That's what's at stake for North Carolina.
Wow. Wow.
And I got a guy in the front here asking me to give it to him. And sir, we're not Democrats. We don't pay people to vote. Your reward for voting for Donald J. Trump is that your checking account's going to get bigger because we're going to pursue common sense economic policies that make us all more prosperous. That's how you're going to get richer, sir.
I love it. I love it. It's just common sense finance, and I love it. I mean, we don't want handouts. We want a hand up, and we want a level playing field, right? That's all that JD Vance and Donald Trump are promising America here.
But I can't blame you for trying. It was worth asking.
I would have tried.
Look, Kamala Harris, it's simple. Kamala Harris broke this economy, and Donald J. Trump will fix it. Kamala Harris inherited an economy where we had 1.5% inflation And over the last 4 years, her inflation has cost North Carolina families about $28,000.
Wow, that's quite a bit. That is, and it would have only gotten worse if Donald Trump didn't win the election, which thankfully he did. But that's not all Donald Trump has done. In fact, Donald Trump may actually be considering replacing Jerome Powell, but let's watch.
Steve Forbes, Forbes media chairman and editor-in-chief, and John Carney, Breitbart finance and economics editor and co-author of Breitbart Business Digest, which you got to get. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Thanks for being here.
You.
Steve, first of all, he may not do it. He may just live with Powell until 2026, but could President Trump fire him?
Well, first of all, Powell has to have a lesson. The Federal Reserve is not a branch of government. It was created by Congress. It's not like the Supreme Court or a federal judge. So now, in terms of he has a term until May of 2026, but the fact of the matter is, if the president wants the Fed chair out, the Fed chair will ultimately resign. The Treasury Department has ultimate authority over the dollar, peculiarity of American law. Now, back with Harry Truman, had a real fight, Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve chairman ended up having to resign as part of a peace agreement between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, which supposedly established Federal Reserve independence.
But what if Powell, in that case, he did resign? What if Powell says, I'm not going to?
Then he would be seen as ineffective. The Treasury Secretary will be setting dollar policy. Wow. It's an untenable position.
Yeah.
And it's also the height of arrogance in the sense, it's not about the Fed independence. That's not the issue. It's about the models they're using on which they base their decisions, which have been universally wrong for a number of years. And that's what they should make the issue. The Fed.
Wow, Steve Forbes is claiming that the Federal Reserve's policies and the models that they've been using over the last several years have been wrong. Is this kind of like an indirect way of suggesting that the Federal Reserve has had some effect on the inflation that we've been seeing over the years, and maybe it's not all caused by the Biden-Harris administration? Or has the Federal Reserve been advised and coerced and directed by the Biden-Harris administration on the actions that they have taken? You know, like it's kind of like, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Fed's incompetence.
Well, talk about incompetence. Jay Powell was talking yesterday about fiscal responsibility. And of course, some people wonder about the responsibility of the Fed to inform Congress and the White House when they're not being fiscally responsible. But let me just roll that tape and get your response.
The U.S. federal government's fiscal policy is on an unsustainable path. You've got a very large deficit you're at full employment, and that's expected to continue. So it's important that that to be dealt with. It is ultimately a threat to the economy.
Yeah. Whoa. Hold on a second. Jerome Powell here has said a lot just now. Jerome Powell, this is Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. He said that we are at full economy, and that the path that the federal government is headed down in terms of spending is unsustainable. Now, any conservative, any Republican has been saying this all along, and many independents as well as a handful of Democrats are actually in agreement with Jerome Powell that we are on a course that is completely unsustainable from a fiscal policy perspective. The U.S. dollar is being treated like trash right now, and this has greatly affected inflation. This is why it takes way more dollars to get stuff, to get groceries, to buy gas, to buy a home, to buy a car, for rent. Everything is going up. And this is why the BRICS nations are basically trying to divest out of the US dollar currency into other currencies. They're investing and they're trading their US currency dollar bills in for gold, precious metals, silver, copper. And they're also looking at other forms of currencies such as cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, you name it. So this poses a threat to the United States. Donald Trump, on the other hand, Donald Trump understands this issue, and we're expecting that Donald Trump will put in policies to kind of help us to regain the strength of the U.S. dollar and to help to make America great again.
Well, where was he with the rollout of all that deficit spending of the Biden administration?
Right. We needed to hear from him back in 2021 when the Biden administration was rolling out the American Rescue Plan, another $2 trillion.
All of Bidenomics rolled into one.
Right. And they really were mum about it. In fact, they covered for it. They did monetary accommodation, which meant that the Fed got to keep doing all of this. And that drove inflation through the roof. And then they said inflation wouldn't be persistent, that it was going to be transitory. So they provided the cover the Biden administration needed to keep on spending. And now he's talking about, unsustainable path. Donald Trump should ignore him. I think Donald Trump actually has the legal authority to remove him. I do not believe that executive branch officers, which essentially is what he is, he's appointed by the president, can serve once they have lost the confidence of the president. I think the Supreme Court would side with him. Donald Trump won't do that, though. He's not going to remove Jay Powell, partly because it would end up in a court fight that might not be resolved until Jay Powell's thing is already
pick your battles, and he has more important things to worry about.
But see, Donald Trump is a very smart negotiator. Art of the Plan, Art of the Deal. I mean, and that's just one of the books that he's written. But here's the thing, guys. Donald Trump knows what the objective is, and I think to the host's point here, this debate could go to courts, and if it goes to the court system, I mean, this could easily last until Jerome Powell's term ends, and that's what, 2026. So it might not even be worth it. But here's the thing. I mean, I think Donald Trump's a pretty good negotiator. Maybe he sits down with Jerome Powell and just says, "Hey guys, this is what we need to do," and maybe Jerome Powell is on board. Like, I don't know Jerome Powell very well, but I would say at this point it's certainly worth just having a simple conversation with the guy. But the thing is this unsustainable path that Jerome Powell is talking about right now, this didn't happen overnight, guys. This did not happen overnight. This happened with the printing of the stimulus checks, which, arguably some of the stimulus checks were printed under Donald Trump's term back in 2020. However, the second stimulus check, the third stimulus check, those were printed under Joe Biden's term. Actually, the second stimulus check was printed under Donald Trump's term as well. But the third stimulus check for $1,400 was printed under Joe Biden's term. But again, you got this $2.2 trillion American Rescue Package. That was $2.2 trillion. So you don't get on a path of unsustainability overnight. So Jerome Powell was clearly on board with the Biden administration when they were telling them to turn on the printers. And so this is not something that he was unaware of. It just doesn't happen this way.
Steve, whether Jay Powell likes it or not, we're going to get supply side policies. The great Judy Shelton, who we all love, who should have been appointed to the Fed. She was nominated by Trump, but she got caught up in a mess in the Senate and didn't make it in. Maybe she will this time. But she talked about the way in which the Fed is going to have to, whether they like it or not, deal with supply side economics on Maria's show earlier. Roll that tape.
And before they roll this tape, this is the other thing here. Joe Biden, he's talking about inflation. Oh, and that's the other concerning thing. There's a couple of things here. So Joe Biden was talking about inflation, and they don't look at the fact that inflation is impacted by supply and demand, right? Why was the fact that supply of goods was never increased to offset the demand so that inflation could be brought down? That's the other thing. They're only looking at interest rates, right? And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be making interest rate changes and modifications. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is that the supply side, the supply chain was never fully corrected after the shutdown and the restart of the economy. So a large part of why prices shot through the roof, look at used cars, look at new cars. Honda Civics shouldn't cost $45,000 freaking dollars, guys. And so this is why, because the supply side was so disrupted for so long and it never really fully caught up. And then companies got, in my opinion, I think companies got greedy and they just realized, hey, we can produce less supply and the American consumer is just going to keep on buying at these higher prices because, we have supply constraints. Now, S&P 500 companies, big corporations, they're saying to themselves, why would we really even want to ramp up production? Now, of course, the government could step in, and I'm not saying that they should or anything like that, but I'm just saying this is how we got here. Corporations are now looking at corporate profits and return on their investments, and they're saying, hey, there's minimal incentive for us to want to increase supply, especially when our profit margins look the way they do now. So screw the consumer, screw, if we're going to get screwed by inflation, we'll just go ahead and keep our our supply producing at the rate that it is, and we'll keep prices high, and we'll blame it on inflation, we'll blame it on all these other factors. But the other thing that was concerning to me from Jerome Powell is that he said that employment is at full capacity. That's a scary statement. Well, that in and of itself is not too scary. But what he said after that was that this is an unsustainable path. And when you talk about employment being at 100%, and then you're also complaining about the spending and fiscal policy of the United States being on an unsustainable path, it makes me feel like the only solution, or one of the solutions that they're looking at, is crashing the economy in terms of the job market. When you say that we're at 100%, when you say we're at full capacity for employment, that means to me that you're seeing too much employment as being a good thing, or excuse me, as being a bad thing. So let me ask you guys, are you willing to quit your job in order to help the economy? Because according to Jerome Powell, having too many jobs is a problem for the economy. But at the same time, if we continue down this path, they're going to destroy the US dollar. And maybe that was their plan all along. But I certainly can't get behind that. That's all I can say. And I'm not willing to, I'm pretty sure my friends and neighbors aren't willing to give their jobs up in order to strengthen the economy. So there's got to be some other solution. But let's roll clip.
If they've come around to thinking that you increase supply rather than try to cut off demand, then that would be good news for the incoming Trump administration, because it would dovetail with a supply side approach that lowers taxes, lowers regulation. So I don't like the Fed kind of now concerned and saying they might have to raise interest rates. That didn't seem to be the path they were on before the election.
Yeah, they have one policy for one president, the other another for another president. I mean, how do you think they will respond, the Fed, to the supply side economics?
And before Steve Forbes responds here, keep in mind, Fed Chair Jerome Powell has lowered interest rates 2 times this year for 2024, a 0.25% rate cut on each one. But let's see what happens here.
I think they will take a wait-see approach. I think the reason why Powell was so, in effect, belligerent by his standards on this, because he knows he has a weak hand. He knows his record is rotten. He knows there are people who are going to be associated with Trump, like David Malpass, who understand the flaws of the Fed and the current models. Judy Shelton, the reason they feared her wasn't her one vote, was she would start to ask embarrassing questions about how they operate.
Yes. John, Judy went on to talk about the Fed staff and how I didn't know the ratio was this big. According to her, anyway, 9-1 in terms of Democrats to Republicans. Even Democrats, though, like Larry Summers, admits that there are too many woke central bankers in the Fed and around the world right now. So how does the Trump team try to untangle that mess, to get some of the wokeness out of our central bank?
Yeah, look, the Fed models will not be able to deal with Trump economics. They will be wrong all the way through, in part because they weren't built to handle anything like the kind of economics Trump is going to propose. So that they are going to be taken aback. They will not be able to model it. In some ways, Jay Powell is absolutely right to say, like, look, we don't know what's going to happen with this. They have no idea. They cannot deal with supply side economics at all because their basic model is just very demand focused. They will raise interest rates to try to stifle demand if they think inflation gets too high.
But let me stop you there. Could that screw up Trump's plans to revitalize?
I don't think it will, because I think they will not have an inflationary excuse to come in. If they try to get ahead of inflation, by the way, they try to say, oh no, we think these tax cuts will be inflationary. The outrage from Congress will be such that that will be a threat to Fed independence, because they will say, we cannot have them setting fiscal policy, which is essentially what they would be doing if they were going to raise rates to get ahead of Trump's fiscal policy.
Yeah. Well,
they would get shut down immediately.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the whole Fed model is based on the idea that prosperity causes inflation.
Right, which is nonsense.
Which is absolute nonsense. And that
Wow. Can you believe this? Steve Forbes just said what I was thinking all along. It's almost like the prosperity of America is the enemy of the Fed. We oh my God. Can you just imagine how detrimental that is if that is their theory, if that's the Fed's unspoken policy, that Americans thriving in an economy is somehow bad for America or bad for the US dollar?
to be attacked. The Federal Reserve looks like it's going to be obstructionist. First of all, the rise in the price of gold tells you that there's real concern about the integrity of the dollar. The Fed is messing up again because it's looking at the wrong
And the
thing.
rise in interest rates. As the Fed lowers rates, the market says, we don't believe you. We think you're going to have to raise them. Those rates have been going
They have
up.
no faith and trust in the Fed. So
Wow.
the Treasury Secretary and the President have to start making that a theme. The Federal Reserve doesn't know what it's doing.
Yeah.
You're doing well is not bad for the country.
I want to stick with you for a second because
Guys, he's preaching. The American people doing well should not be viewed as a detriment to fiscal policy. It can't. I mean, like, if that's the case, should we remain broke and poor for the greater good of the country forever? That's not what our forefathers planned for. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not life, liberty, and the pursuit of remaining poor.
you focused on this before. What about something really revolutionary? Essentially getting rid of the Federal Reserve Board, going back to a gold standard, turning the Federal Reserve into a kind of a currency exchange rather than somebody that sets Fed rates, et cetera. Would Trump be interested in something like really revolutionary like that?
Whoa. Unbelievable. He again said the quiet part out loud, possibly getting rid of the Fed. Can you imagine that, guys? Donald Trump comes in with JD Vance and cleans up America, restores the economy, builds back the US dollar, and removes the Federal Reserve, or even better, makes the dollar backed by gold again, and all of a sudden the United States dollar is just this unstoppable fiat currency. Can you imagine? Oh, wow.
I think when he gets his program in and the economy responds well, so we don't have some disaster overseas, China or whatever, I think then he'd have the political capital to say, we need a real remake of the Federal Reserve, starting with the Federal Reserve models. Have Congress start to hold hearings, get people prepared, marinate that the way the Fed operates now is destructive to the economy. Subpar performance is always the result with the Fed in charge.
By the way,
Wow. Hey, comment down below. Do you think Donald Trump should come in and remove the Federal Reserve altogether and make the US dollar backed by gold again? Let me know, guys. We've seen the stock market on a tear lately. S&P 500, NASDAQ, Dow Jones, they're all climbing. 401k balances are increasing across the board for the most part. And Americans are starting to feel some degree of prosperity. Me personally, I have some pretty high expectations for America going forward, guys. What do you guys think? Hit me up in the comment section down below. Don't forget to hit the like button for the video. For more content, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Y'all be safe.